Here in California, convicted killer Stanley Tookie Williams has lost a major bid to spare his life. The state Supreme Court refused to halt his execution later this month. Williams founded the Crips street gang, but in prison, he became an anti-gang activist and even wrote children's books. Hollywood celebrities have been calling for clemency. That decision rests with Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger.
California Governor Schwarzenegger denied clemency today to Stanley Tookie Williams. The founder of the feared Crips gang was convicted of murdering 4 people in 1979. Supporters said he made amends by writing children's books about the dangers of gangs. But in a statement today, the governor said, without an apology and atonement, there can be no redemption. Williams has maintained his innocence. He's set to be executed by lethal injection just after midnight. The state of California carried out a highly publicized execution early today. Stanley Tookie Williams was put to death by lethal injection. The founder of the Crips gang was convicted of murdering 4 people in 1979. Hundreds of people protested the execution outside San Quentin prison. Later, supporters of Williams and the murder victims spoke after witnessing the execution.
After the murder of Stanley Tookie Williams, and we were told to leave, as we left, we screamed in unison, "The state of California just killed an innocent man."
It was very difficult. I don't take pleasure in that, but I am pleased that the justice system did work. I do. I really do. I believe it was a just punishment, long overdue.
Williams had maintained his innocence to the end.
If you could just give your full name and spell it for me, please.
Yes, Brian. My name is Peter Fleming, F-L-E-M-I-N-G, Jr.
And we should identify you as?
I'm a lawyer. I'm a partner in a New York law firm named Curtis Mallet, Prevost, Colton, Mosley.
Okay, but I suppose for the purpose of this, we call you Tookie Williams' attorney.
Well, that's right. Together with people here at Curtis who are part of the team.
Okay. Do you have any reason to be disappointed that you can get clemency?
No, I'm really very neutral on that, Brian. There's nothing that's happened that causes me to believe what the government will decide one way or the other.
I think the most basic question here is, in the case that you have to make for getting clemency, is why should the good deeds of a man after he is convicted of murder earn him clemency?
Well, I think I think this case is about Stanley Williams, and it's also about thousands of kids that live in difficult circumstances in this country and who are important to the future of this country and who have talents which are not which if they are not harvested are going to cost a great deal to a country which relies upon its young people. And those are the children. I don't want to call them children. Those are the teenagers, the younger people, the people who teach them, their parents. Those are the people to whom Stanley Williams speaks. You know, he has received celebrity support, and he appreciates that, and of course we appreciate that. But the support for Stanley Williams really comes from down to up. We have tens of thousands of emails, letters, received one this morning, from teachers, children, citizens, thanking Stanley Williams for what he has done. What I'm saying is that he is a major resource, in my view, and I feel very strongly about this issue for reasons I could explain. He's a major resource to the state of California and beyond the state of California in reaching out to young people and telling young people that despite the circumstance in which they live, if they seek purpose, they seek education, they avoid what he did not avoid, they can succeed and they can live worthwhile and hopeful and fulfilling lives. I can't think of any issue that is more important to this country than that issue.
But aren't there other voices for that who haven't killed anybody?
There are other voices. One of them I'd like to quote in a minute. Of course there are other voices. There's a wonderful man, a Jesuit, Father Greg Boyle, who's written a letter on Stanley's behalf, who runs the largest gang organization in the United States. But Stanley is in a unique position because he has been there. I can go and talk to young children and advise them about the difficulties of life and the rest, and they can look at me and they say, oh, well, you know, Mr. Fleming, you're a lawyer. Stanley Williams has been where they are. He's engaged in the conduct which he now finds despicable. So he speaks with a very special authority. And the response that he has received in the form, as I say, of tens of thousands of emails, letters, petitions, the response he receives recognizes the fact that his message reverberates because he has been there. He is speaking from experience. He is in jail because of having been there. And he has the authority to say, don't join me. Reject what I did.
So this is not so much about saving Tookie for his own sake, but saving him for what he can do for other people?
Well, I think it's about both. The governor, as you know, is in favor of rehabilitation. And there's no question about Stanley's rehabilitation. So it is about his personal redemption as an example to citizens, to children, to prisoners. But I go beyond that and say that the significant factor is what he did with that redemption. He didn't just sit quietly with it. He wrote books, he reached out, and he touched people, he touched chords, and the response has been dramatic. So I do think a very, very real sense that this case is about Stanley Williams, the man, but it is also about hundreds of thousands of young children who live in America in difficult circumstances. You know, this is something that Governor Schwarzenegger himself recognized back in I believe it's August of 2000. You know, the governor started the inner city games, and he wrote a piece on August 16, 2000 in the Los Angeles Times. And if I could just take a moment, among the things he said, he talked about his realization of the American dream. And then he said, the American dream, ? In the inner cities, children don't even dare to dream. The message, don't bother. You'll never make it. You're a loser. And then he went on to say, we can help these children. We can help them to get the drive, focus, attention, skills, and pride that lead to hope. We can get all our kids up to the same starting line. That's Stanley Williams' message, and as I say, he gives it with a particular resonance because he has lived that life. It has put him where he is. He has rejected that life openly, and he has reached out and touched thousands of people, as is evidenced by the response to his petition for clemency, by his nomination on 5 occasions for a Nobel Prize. It's really an extraordinary story.
I'm interested in his formal apology from 1997. And it's pretty, he does not admit anything. And I realize he still contests that he ever committed these 4 murders. But beyond that, in the apology, the closest he comes is, he says, I no longer participate in the so-called gangster lifestyle. The gangster life involves drugs, theft, murder sometimes, a lot of crimes. And he doesn't really admit to anything. And wouldn't that be the heart of redemption, is to admit what you did?
Well, I really disagree with what you're saying. I think in his book, A Life in Prison, and in his apology, he is admitting that the life he led as a Crip before he was convicted and sent to jail was a life which was despicable, and one which he rejects and regrets, and one which should not be emulated. I think he says clearly, don't look at me as a hero, I'm not. Don't follow my path. I think he has apologized.
Does he list the crimes he commits?
No, I don't think that. I don't think he lists any crimes he may have committed. He apologized for his conduct, and he calls his conduct despicable.
Yeah, and see, that's where it kind of loses me. I'm left wondering, well, what was the conduct he's apologizing for? It doesn't seem fully forthright to me.
Well, you know, I can't speak for you. It does for me. I've met the man. It appears to be forthright to the tens of thousands of people who have communicated both with him and with us, and who have signed petitions on his behalf. And I can only speak to that. There is no question that his message has resonated. There is no question that his redemption is accepted by hundreds of thousands of people. I got a letter this morning from a woman in Indiana. And she says very simply, it's a long handwritten letter, and she concludes it. She said, just wanted to write. And she says, in your case, you are fine either way. Regardless of what the world says between now and December 13, the Lord has spoken to you. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Now that woman believes his apology is genuine, and that woman believes his work is true and valuable, and that he has redeemed himself.
Sure. Well, fair enough. My job is to ask you some tough questions if I can. I want to go back to my original question. Why should good works committed after a murder, and in this case 4 murders, be grounds for clemency?
Well, clemency is an act of mercy, as I'm sure you know. We quote from Justice Marshall a long time ago, and from Oliver Wendell Holmes. Oliver Wendell Holmes says clemency is a part of the constitutional scheme. It dates back centuries. When granted, it is the determination of the ultimate authority that the public welfare will be better served by inflicting less than what the judgment fixed. So let me, if I could take just a minute, I want to be clear on this. We're looking for clemency. What are we asking for? We're asking that, in essence, the simplest way to put it, we're asking that Stanley Williams' sentence be reduced from death to life imprisonment without parole. And we're doing that because we believe that if he can continue to live, he will be able to continue to send the messages that he has been sending to young people. And if he is killed, it seems to me it will seem to be a statement that the message he has been sending does not count, and that he himself does not count. He's 52 years old. He has years to live. He has a passion for the work he's doing, and people are looking towards him for leadership. And as I say, when he talks, people listen.
Isn't that the message of the death penalty? That after you've committed murder, the message of the death penalty is you don't count, and it's a harsh message.
Well, it's not an invariable message. If the death penalty were the end of the matter, then there would be no constitutional right to clemency. Clearly, there are circumstances, as was exhibited in Virginia just the other day, there are circumstances where the chief executive of the state can make a determination that it is more valuable that a man live than that he die. And we believe that is the situation here, and we are hopeful that Governor Schwarzenegger will see it that way. There's no question, there's no question in my mind that Governor Schwarzenegger is well aware of the plight of the people to whom Stanley is speaking, and well aware of the need to, as he said, to bring these children up to the same starting line. I've got a son who's a football coach, and he recruits, and he calls me from time to time, and he called me once from Elizabeth, New Jersey. This was just one of 15 calls. And he'd spoken to a great kid. The boy he's an African-American boy. He had a 1.1 GPA average. He was living in a boxcar with his grandmother. And Jim, my son, said, he's a bright kid. Nobody ever paid attention to him, and now he has no chance. That's who Stanley Williams is talking to. That's why I believe his message is important. That's why I believe his life being able to live his life and pursue this passion serves the people of California more than killing him.
So that's well stated. What's your reading of the position that puts the governor in? This is a tough one for him.
Well, I wonder about that. I don't know, I've never met the governor, don't know the governor. He took what I consider to be the courageous step of entering public service. And I look at him, and we say so in our memorandum, I look at him as a man of courage and a man of his own mind. And this is a decision which falls to him and him alone. And I believe he's the kind of man who can make it.
No governor has given clemency out here since 1967, I think it was.
No, it was Ronald Reagan in 1967. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the Governor Schwarzenegger's predecessor, his position was the courts have spoken, that's the end of it. That's really an unconstitutional position, because the Constitution, and this goes back centuries, the Constitution provides specifically that there are circumstances where the chief executive has the power, which he should exercise one way or the other as a matter of constitutional power, to grant clemency if he sees fit. And we believe this is a case where clemency should be seriously considered. And, we have every reason to believe that Governor Schwarzenegger will consider it seriously.
Would he have a better chance if he said, I did this, I killed those 4 people?
People have said that, and I've been trying to answer that for the last week. And I've said that, the common knowledge is that, yes, if Stanley were to confess to crimes which he says he did not commit, in other words, if he were to make a false confession, maybe that would help. But I've been thinking about that. I was thinking about it overnight, and I'm not entirely sure. It seems to me that, I think what counts is the truth. And if the impression is that Stanley Williams is lying about his innocence, then he's not telling the truth. But I've spoken to Stanley Williams. He knows the consequences of his insistence on innocence. He can speak to it far better than I can. But I do know that his position is very simple. If a false confession is the price of clemency, I will not pay that price. And I think that demonstrates the character of this man.
Okay. You will personally be in the meeting with the governor?
Yes, I'll be there. My senior colleague, John Harris, will be there. A young woman named Lorraine Redmond, who is responsible for us being in this in the first place, will be there. Counsel from California will be there. And that's it.
And are you likely to say anything to the governor that you haven't said to me?
You never know you're there. I'm a trial lawyer, and you prepare what you have to say, and sometimes you say more. Yeah. I can't answer that. We genuinely appreciate the governor seeing us and allowing to speak to us. We are genuinely interested in the questions he will have, and we'll attempt to answer those, hopefully to his satisfaction. But I take nothing from the fact that he has offered this opportunity, only that we're very appreciative that he has.
Put it this way, do you think there's any thought or line of reasoning that will appeal in particular to Governor Schwarzenegger?
Well, this is presumptuous. I'm going to answer that question, but I really don't want to in any way infer that I believe it's the message, that it should be his message. I believe that Stanley Williams has done what he has done while he's in jail, reaching out for children. It has been recognized. And the message is a message which no one can contest, that we have to help these children. We have to encourage these children. We have to harness harvest their abilities, or we lose something.
I'm sorry, could you start this thought over? Yeah, there was that beeper just went off.
I said, the message, Stanley Williams' message is a message which no one can contest. These children do live in difficult situations. They do need hope. They do need encouragement. They do need to reject violence. They do need their talents do need to be harvested. They are in part, and in large part, the future of this country. Now, I think our message is clemency for Stanley Williams will tell those children, will tell those teachers who teach those children, will tell the parents of those children that this governor and the state of California understand their plight, will help them, and agree with Stanley Williams' message. And I find that to be more valuable to all of the people of California. And it's not my job, but I don't want to be intrusive here, but I find that to be the best message.
Okay, very good. I think we are done.
All right, well, thanks a million.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, guys. Yes, sir. Are you able to get any, were you in a conference?
Could I do one other thing? I've been talking about these responses. If you have our petitions, we've attached some examples of these emails, but let me read one because it's what I've been talking about. I mentioned Father Greg Boyle. He runs Homeboy Industries, which is the largest gang rehabilitation program in the U.S. And he's an extraordinary man. And he wrote to the governor in support of clemency, and he wrote what I've been saying. Redemption is their only hope in reconstructing lives broken by gang violence. The hope of beginning anew is the bright promise we offer. By exercising your power, you can send the right signal of hope to those for whom hope is foreign. And then he says, your decision to spare Stanley Williams' life will touch that lethal absence of hope in my community. And here's one other thing. This is a young student from South Central. She sent an email to the governor. Said, Stanley Williams made me think. That's almost enough. Made me think. And now I know if he can change his life, then I have the power and confidence to change my own life around. He gave me a lot of confidence. I just hope you find it in your heart to save him and everyone he has saved. Those two statements sort of sum up what I've been talking about now for 15 or 20 minutes.
Good. All right. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Now, guys, are you able to get a little bit of B-roll?
Yeah, sure. They're all there.
Yeah.
So,
I don't wear this thing around.
He doesn't actually.
Are you ready?
yeah, I'm rolling.
Okay. Joni, what do you got?
Lots of telephone messages, lots of mail, lots of calls from the press.
Mother,
Yeah, lots of calls.
that drives me crazy. All right, I'll take all of this and try to get it done.
Okay.
Just walk away.
Okay, thanks.
I wish it. Okay, can I say? Ron, please come on.
Hi, my name's Sandy Gibbons. I'm with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. I'm not going to speak to you, but I did want to introduce the gentlemen who were in the meeting for the DA's office. Head Deputy District Attorney Pat Dixon, John Monahan, who's the lead prosecutor in this case, David Walgren, who is part of the team, and Ron Bowers, who is also part of the team. Mr. Monahan, M-O-N-A-G-H-A-N, first name John, Deputy District Attorney, will be the speaker today, and I'm going to turn it over to him now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We just simply want to thank Governor Schwarzenegger for giving us the time to present our position in this matter, and he was very gracious. I don't think it's appropriate to comment what we indicated during the private meeting, but we were able to put forth our position in this matter. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer a few questions.
Can you describe, sir, the mood and the atmosphere inside the governor's office during the hearing?
Again, I just don't think it'd be appropriate to comment on what took place during a private meeting.
Follow up on that, though. Could you tell us why you feel, this is not necessarily what you said to the governor, why you feel Mr. Williams should not be granted clemency and should be put to death?
Very simply, in our opinion, there are certain murders, not every murder, where an individual's conduct is just so abhorrent. The crime is so brutal, it simply justifies the ultimate punishment. In this particular case, Mr. Williams made a decision. He made a choice to kill Mr. Owens back at the 7-Eleven in February of 1979. Mr. Owens was helpless. He was not a threat to Mr. Williams. He was laying face down in the back room at the 7-Eleven, and Mr. Williams stood over him and fired twice into his back at close range with a 12-gauge shotgun. Less than 2 weeks later, at about 5 in the morning, Mr. Williams forced his way into a small family-run motel in Los Angeles, and inside that motel, shot to death a 63-year-old woman, her 76-year-old husband, and their 41-year-old daughter. There was simply no reason or rationale for those murders. The robbery netted Mr. Williams less than $100. These individuals, two of the individuals were shot multiple times. The 41-year-old daughter literally had the left side of her head and face blown off. These were extremely brutal crimes committed against people that simply were defenseless. And what's more, folks, it's not just the Owens and the Yang family that were the victims of these crimes. Society was a victim. And I think when you also consider the fact that Mr. Williams is the admitted co-founder of the Crips gang, one of the most brutal gangs that has ever been assembled in this country, when you look at the literally tens of thousands of murders that have involved Crip gang members over the last quarter century, and you look at Mr. Williams' conduct in prison, you look at the fact that he refuses to take part in the debriefing process, which is basically the only way the California Department of Corrections can determine if he truly has changed his ways. I think in this situation that the ultimate penalty is the appropriate penalty.
Mr. Monahan, what is your outlook now? What is your outlook now, Mr. Monahan?
My outlook has been the same since I was given this case to review. That is that the evidence in this case is truly overwhelming, and that the murders were senseless, they were very brutal, and that Mr. Williams should pay the ultimate penalty for his crimes.
After having been in that hearing, how do you feel at this point, sir?
Of public attention in this case, or to any case, should make a difference when a governor is deciding clemency?
Absolutely not.
So that to follow up on that, what should make the difference? If public interest and people who care about what he's done doesn't matter.
You know, I certainly couldn't answer for a governor, but what I could say is, to me, if it was my decision, I would look at the circumstances surrounding the crimes. I would want to satisfy myself that the evidence was in fact overwhelming. I would look at the person's background. I would look at his prison conduct. And I would want to take a look at the entire package before I made my decision.
Does rehabilitation ever play a role in a consideration like that?
I think it depends on the circumstances. I don't think in this case there's been any redemption. When Mr. Williams was interviewed on 60 Minutes in 2004, I believe it was May of 2004, he specifically told correspondent Bradley that he would never debrief. It's like snitching. Now, what kind of a message does that send to young children when somebody like Mr. Williams, who supposedly has their attention, tells them, don't snitch, don't talk to the police, don't tell the police if you witness a crime, don't tell the police who was involved in a crime? What kind of a message is that to young people? And again, I simply don't think it's the kind of message of somebody that has truly turned their back on the Crip gang. And also, you talk about redemption. This is not a situation where Mr. Williams admits he committed these crimes. In the face of overwhelming evidence, he denies he committed them because he knows if he admitted he committed them, he simply wouldn't have any chance at all. Mr. Williams is not just pushing for clemency, folks. You can bet your bottom dollar that between now and Tuesday, additional petitions will be filed by Mr. Williams' attorneys in both state and federal court, probably alleging all sorts of things, probably including total innocence. Mr. Williams wants out of prison. This has nothing to do with redemption. He is saying what he needs to say so that he has the best chance of escaping the predicament that his actions got himself into.
Do you believe that anything he has done since then deserves to be considered? Has he made some positive efforts, you feel, to turn kids off to gangs?
I don't believe so, because I think if he would have made positive efforts, Vernell Crittenden, the public information officer at San Quentin Prison, probably the man within the California Department of Corrections that knows Mr. Williams the best, indicated in the same 60 Minutes piece that if Mr. Williams truly had turned a new leaf, he would sit down and he would debrief. He would lay out everything he knows about the Crip gang, how they were formed, how they conduct their business. I mean, they're notorious drug dealers. They sell weapons. I mean, this is the type of information, even though it may only be of an historical perspective, but it's the type of information that would be important to law enforcement, and the message it would send is this. It would send a message to these young kids: I have completely turned my back on everything that I was. The way to put an end to this gang violence is to inform if you see something. Tell the police what you observe. But he wants to set up a dual system, one for him, one for everyone else.
What's your reaction to the campaign? What's the reaction to the campaign that's being waged on his behalf with the celebrities and the mentioning of the Peace Prize nominations and the books and all that? What's your reaction to that whole thing?
Is all I can say is this: there are people that are very much against the death penalty, and in a free society, that certainly is a topic that is worthy of discussion. But I think if you look at the motives of the people that have supported Mr. Williams, the people that nominated him for the various Nobel Peace Prizes, the Prize in Literature and the Peace Prize, they are people that are adamantly against the death penalty. They have their own agenda. Now, if the citizens of California decided that the death penalty was not for California and by majority rule put an end to the death penalty in this state, that's one thing. And I have nothing but respect for people's opinions. And there are many people that feel the death penalty is inappropriate. I believe it's appropriate in certain circumstances. I believe this is one of those circumstances. And I believe that majority rule should prevail, and the majority of Californians believe that the death penalty is appropriate.
Mr. Monahan, how do you feel coming out of this meeting? How confident do you feel?
Again, I simply wouldn't want to comment on anything that had to do with the private meeting that we had with the governor.
Do you not think these folks have to catch a plane, guys, so we have time for about 2 more questions.
His prison conduct, post-redemption conduct may not be dispositive in your view, but has he made any contribution, any positive contribution to the discussion about gang violence?
Well, you look at some of these peace protocols that he claims to have set in place, specifically in Newark, New Jersey, they just haven't held up. I mean, I simply don't believe he holds any sway. I think that it just doesn't make a difference. Sir?
If the execution goes forth, will any of you be witnessing this?
I would be representing the district attorney's office.
Anyone else? Just you?
To my knowledge, I would be the only one.
Did you do most of the talking in the hearing?
Yes.
All of it?
Thank you very much.
Did the governor say anything at all in the meeting, ask any questions?
Again, I don't want to comment on what was a private meeting, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I have a feeling that Peter Fleming is not the bad.
What do you all do? Let me take a minute. I think a lot of you know of John Harris because he has talked to any number of you. You know me, Peter Fleming, who's talked to fewer of you. This is Verna Wofeld.
Weefald.
Who is a very, very remarkable lawyer and human being who has worked the mean streets for a long time. Verna was responsible for filing the papers, the discovery motion in the Supreme Court, which was filed last week, where that motion was rejected on by a vote of 4-2, which I thought was significant and remarkable, because two justices, including the Chief Justice, voted in Verna's favor, or in Stanley's favor, and said specifically, we would have granted this motion, which was a motion for the disclosure of exculpatory evidence which had been withheld previously, going, of course, to the very fairness of trial. What's your name? Lorian Redmond is a young, a young associate at our law firm in New York City. Lorian went to UCal at Bolt Law School. She participated in some death penalty seminars, and she's the one that got us here because she received a call from the American Bar Association Project for Death Penalty Representation, which reaches out to law firms who are prepared on a pro bono basis to undertake a representation. And Lorraine came into my office with John Harris and Julie Withers, who was on my left. She also works at our firm. Raised the question of this with me. Pro bono was okay right away, but I wanted to find as much as I could about Stanley Williams. I found out as much as I could about Stanley Williams. I met Stanley Williams, and while it wasn't only my determination, it was certainly my determination that Stanley Williams was a person in a life worth fighting for. And Sandy Thayer works at the Howrey, H-O-W-R-E-Y, law firm in Los Angeles. It's a national law firm. She's been of enormous assistance to us, both as California counsel, but also in the work that we've done in connection with this representation. And I think that's it. We met with the governor, together with the representatives of the Office of the District Attorney for the allotted time. We will not answer any questions having to do with that meeting or the content of that meeting, which we consider to be private. That is our decision. It is not the governor's decision. It is our decision because we believe it is the appropriate decision. And that ends the press conference.
Well, then you don't want to talk about the content. What were you hoping to gain by having this meeting other than the obvious? What were your best arguments that were presented to the governor? Technically speaking, I guess, if you can talk specifically.
I'm sorry, because Lorian was whispering in my ear and I didn't hear a word you said.
What were the best arguments that you presented for it? Will you say that Stan Williams is a life worth saving? How did you present it?
I had a lawyer when I was getting out of law school. I was interviewing for jobs, and I was asked down to interview at a prestigious New York law firm. And I was talking to one of the partners, and he said that
I'm sorry, someone's got a BlackBerry or something that's interfering with the audio. So if you have a BlackBerry or a cell phone, we really need you to turn it off. I'm sorry, sir, we can't even hear you.
Turn it off.
No. Okay, just Just,
Everybody's got a cell phone. Turn it on.
sorry, sir. Just couldn't hear you in the audio.
Sorry.
It's a local 1190 problem.
Sorry.
And this lawyer was, senior lawyer was talking to me, pretty young, and he said the secret of appellate argument was to make sure that the winning argument occurred to the judge without you making it. So in answer to your question, that's my answer to your question. What was or was not persuasive is something that I cannot state or predict.
Well, at least how do you feel about the way things went today? You can speak, not the content, but how do you feel? Do you feel the message got across? Was the governor appear receptive? Did he ask any questions?
Well, 2 out of 3 I won't answer. The other is we were able to say what we wanted to say.
Why clemency?
Why clemency? As opposed to death? Well, this is outside of the meeting. I think any number of you know from reading our petitions, our petition and our reply petition, and from personal conversations. Let me tell you my reason. I think that the biggest problem in this country is the education of the youth of this country. I believe that this country has one obligation, that is, every child has a name, and every child should have an opportunity. I believe we're failing in that. I believe that Stanley Williams, for the past 13 years, has struggled mightily in the most difficult of circumstances to address that problem, and to address that problem particularly in those environments where life can be seen as most hopeless. You don't fake that for 13 years. He has that impact, demonstrated impact, as shown by over 100,000 emails and letters written on his behalf in this connection with this clemency, from teachers, students, parents of at-risk children. Over 100,000 emails over the course of time thanking him. And he speaks with a unique voice. You know, a football player, I'm told, will respond better to the coaching of a football coach who has played football. And Stanley Williams has been where these at-risk children are. And the whole thrust of his message is, don't do what I did. What I did was despicable. Reject violence, find purpose, strive. And all children need to be told that at least every other day.
What do you think your chances are of actually winning the clemency?
I'm not an odds maker.
What is your outlook at this point?
I'm not an odds maker.
Did you present a letter from Mr. Williams to the governor?
I'm not discussing the hearing.
Have you spoken to Mr. Williams today?
No.
Have you?
What do you do now? What's the next step?
Well, someone could say lunch, but I'm not sure of that.
Legally, what's the next step?
Not addressing that.
How confident do you feel?
No.
How confident do you feel, sir? Sir, how do you
I'm not addressing the conference.
Are there other legal options left available?
I'm not addressing that.
What are you addressing?
I sound like what's his name, Drew Rosenhaus?
Sir, can't you tell us?
Next question.
Sir,
Next
can you tell us
question.
how you feel? It's not.
What do you want me to do?
It's not.
What?
How do you feel, sir?
If I were the
Sir.
Eagles, I'd play T.O.
Sir, how do you feel?
Can you?
About T.O.?
How do you feel after coming out of this meeting?
I'm not addressing how I feel, how the meeting went. I'm trying to make this as amusing and as irrelevant a press
Well, Peter,
conference as I
can you
possibly
try
can.
to- can you-
I will say that I spoke and John Harris spoke.
Did the governor?
Do you have a sense as to when he?
Everyone you see here was in the room.
Do you have a sense as to when the governor might make a decision?
None whatsoever.
Can you address the issue of why? Can you address the issue of why clemency matters in this case when the person in particular has never admitted to the crime, says he never did them? So what is he seeking clemency for? I mean, in other words, some people have said that kind of undershoots the idea of clemency, that you haven't said I've done something wrong and I want to be forgiven for it.
Let me take a little time with that, if it's okay with you.
Please.
Stanley has, when I first met Stanley, I said, if you did this, you should confess to it, because it will help. And he said, if my innocence will cost me my life, so be it. Now, he is guilty under law, and he is sentenced to death. And he can't wave his hand and say, I'm innocent, and therefore don't kill me. So he's seeking clemency. Now, I worked as a federal prosecutor for 9 years in New York City under Bob Morgenthau. Never gave immunity to a witness in my life. That office gave immunity to one witness once. And I've forgotten what I wanted to say. What are we talking about?
About why clemency, what clemency is about, innocence or guilt.
That shows you what happens when you get this old.
Morgenthau.
Can you tell
Yeah,
us?
that's just,
Could you tell
I'll
us
get back
about
to
any interaction between the governor
No.
and Mr. Williams during their bodybuilding days?
no.
Without discussing the substance of the hearing, Mr. Fleming, can you talk about the significance of the fact that there was a hearing, there's not always a hearing, and what you see in the governor's background that might incline him toward your argument?
I took absolutely nothing, and I've said this before. I took absolutely nothing one way or the other from the scheduling of this meeting.
Sir, yesterday you described yourself as frightened to death about the prospects of this execution taking place. Are you any less fearful today after this meeting than you were yesterday when you spoke those words?
I'm still frightened to death.
If the execution goes forth, are there any of you who will be witnessing this thing?
I'm not going to address that.
Can you tell us who did most of the talking in the hearing?
I did. Surprise.
Did he ask any questions? Did the governor ask any questions?
I'm not discussing the hearing.
Peter, sort of what he was asking before, can you describe right now, you've been with Mr. Williams for a while now. As these days get approaching the execution scheduling, can you talk about your mood right now? How difficult this is for you?
This is, you know, I thought I did yesterday, and I just did it again, and this is not it's not about me.
Why are you still
If Mr.
frightened to
Williams
death?
If Mr. Williams gets immunity, and if he's innocent, why wouldn't he then, I'm sorry, if he gets clemency and if he's innocent, why wouldn't he then try to get a new trial after this matter is resolved?
Well, there's been 5 habeas courts. My understanding is, and Myra can address better than I can because she knows the habeas law better than I know it, is that it would be Stanley's burden presently would to prove he was innocent. And if he were innocent, he shouldn't be in jail at all. So that's where life without the possibility of parole is life.
Would you have rather had a public clemency hearing, and why or why not?
I'm sorry?
Would you have rather had a public clemency hearing, and why or why not?
Governor, it is the governor's power, and it's the governor's power to conduct whatever the governor wants to conduct in the manner which he thinks appropriate. And I really got nothing else to say.
Can you tell us if you'll be talking with your client later and tell them how the meeting went?
Don't know.
You don't know?
One second, please.
George, I have one question. Why are we here?
Yeah. Still haven't got the guy. That's right. Working Morgenthau, huh?
They reminded me that at our last visit with Stanley, he asked us to tell you that his message, whatever the result, was a message of peace.
When was that last meeting? When did you last meet with Williams?
I last saw him on Monday. Thank you very much. You've been fair and courteous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We rarely get that.
We've been here. Okay.